Storytelling. Storytelling has been around since the beginning of time. Cavemen would draw pictures on the walls to describe their day, their hunting, whatever else they were getting up to. Even before the written word, we would tell stories to our children. We would tell stories to our tribes. We would pass on our oral history. It's how we maintained our learning, by passing it on from generation to generation in stories. And even when the written word came in, stories were still used as a powerful medium to get a message across. You only have to think of the famous Grimm story tales and how some of those stories had some really clear messages in them, like don't go creeping about in the woods. We tell our children stories. It helps them relax, it gets them to sleep. It helps them learn about the world around them. And in business, some of the biggest businesses have used storytelling to its absolute best. Again, you only have to think of the Christmas adverts. The competition to come up with the best advert and storyline going, and sometimes they don't even have to mention the product. And let's face it, Coca-Cola changed the world with the biggest story ever. Santa in a red outfit was dreamed up by Coca-Cola. And how often do we now go, Christmas has started because the big van is driving with the big Santa on the back? That is how powerful storytelling in business can be. But where do you start? Often people will say, I don't have a story. Nothing amazing's ever happened to me. Nothing grand. I haven't achieved anything major. I haven't had any heartbreak. The majority of us haven't had these big dramatic moments in our lives. But that doesn't mean we don't have a story. Our stories are our lives. From the minute we are born to the minute we die, we are living our own personal story. It's true that we are really, really attracted to those stories that show huge outcomes from really difficult situations, and we want to read about people that are going through absolute hell and how they come out from that. We're quite nosy, actually. We love to know about people's lives. But the thing about stories is, in business, your story has to be relatable. It has to be something that somebody can go, I need that. That's what I want. So your story will depend on the type of coaching or the teaching or the products you have. And people that coach in those really dramatic situations, and they coach for abusive women or people at risk or vulnerable, they have usually been through that. I would argue they have to have gone through that to understand that journey. And those people that are relating to it want to have that same outcome at the other end. People don't remember statistics. They don't remember numbers and pages of just written stuff. We remember stories. Stories have to be an emotional engagement, because when we think and become emotionally involved in somebody's story, our brain clicks in. It's as if we're doing that same activity ourselves. We are willing people to succeed. We want what they have got. I want you to think about now your story. Let's start with the simplest story. Why did you set up your business? Why did you go into business? What is it about what you do that has an emotional attachment to it? And I want you to think about that. Because actually one of the things we do when we're talking to people is build in that story. I talk a lot about the fact that I got into business speaking because that's what I was trained to do. I was once going to be a very famous actress. Never happened, but that doesn't matter because the skills I gained in helping other people tell their story. And for me, it's always about the message we give to ourselves and the message we give out to other people. These are mini stories, and 9 times out of 10, the messages we give ourselves are simply not true. But they actually have a bearing on the messages we then give out. And that's why so many people say, no, I don't have a story. I'm not exciting. Think about why you do what you do. What made you do what you do? What started that? Was it something you've always wanted to do? Did you fall into it? Did you discover this amazing talent or skill you never knew you had? That's the thing you're looking for, the why. Stories are about the why and the outcome. Think about the products you produce. Do they have stories? Do they have their own individual little stories? If you produce gin, for instance, and they have different flavours, how did you come up with those different flavours? Because how you came up with them, or why you came up with them, is a story in itself. And we're fascinated by those stories. I remember sitting in public houses, in pubs, and picking up the beer mat and reading about the history of whichever country pub I was in. It's quite fascinating. Or you'll sit somewhere and they'll have photos on the walls of their history and you'll read them and become engaged. You suddenly become emotionally engaged. And that pushes up the fact that people are going to like and they're going to trust. What about your brand story? How did your brand come about? My brand came about because I've always insisted on having pink or purple hair. It sort of became something that happened, but actually it's quite a funny story about the various colours my hair has been, and it is a part of my brand, and it has impacted on how I present myself. So if you are your business, if you are your brand, you need to be thinking about that story. How did it come about? What does it do for you? How does it make people feel? And then you have your customer stories, your employee stories. So many stories to pick from that you can use to engage your clients or your audience or your customers. Now, there is a technique to stories. There is. Stories have a beginning, a middle, and an end. It doesn't matter how short they are or how long they are. They have to have a beginning, a middle, and an end. And they have a meaning. There has to be a message in there somewhere, a meaning. The other thing about stories is there has to be a hero or heroine. There has to be perseverance. There has to be challenge. There has to be getting over some sort of obstacle or barrier. There has to be that winning thing that you discover at the end, or you fulfill, or you complete. That's what makes a compelling story. Let's look at the different types of stories. We have the rags to riches stories. This is one of the most popular stories. People want to go from rags because we're all very poor to riches. And how do people do that? You'll spot that on most people's landing pages when they talk about being penniless and only having their last £5 in their pocket, and they put it somewhere and suddenly they're multimillionaires, or they started a business with nothing and now they're multimillionaires. You too could be a multimillionaire. We buy into that story because we want to follow that journey. So the rags to riches one is a really interesting one. Then you have the journey story. What was the journey like? How long did it take you to get where you want to go? Did you start because you had a desperate need to help society and put all the injustice right? and you went to college and you went to uni and you were much older than everybody else and you persevered and you brought up your family and finally you got there and you got your graduation and you're now a solicitor, lawyer, and you're out there helping people against injustice. That's a journey story. And it's a journey story that fascinates us. One, because some of us may want that journey, not necessarily to be a solicitor or a lawyer, but have some sort of dream they want to aim at. And they want to emulate and be motivated and inspired by people who have done that journey. And some people are just fascinated in people's journeys to be where they are today. You've got the George and the Dragon story, as I call it, slaying the monster. Lots of those stories around at the moment. And that's when you have a big obstacle to overcome. Part of my story involves the George and the Dragon because I had an illness that put me in bed for 2 years. And I woke up one day and said, this can't carry on. So my big dragon was the illness I had and how I overcame that and managed to actually have a semi-normal life and have a business and do the things I love to do. These are all the stories that mix together. And you don't have to have one or the other. You mix and match. They have different things in them. And when you get really good at crafting those stories, you'll find you have a bit of every type of story in there. And the reason they become powerful is because we are DNA'd to listen to stories. That's how mankind has grown up. It's still a really subconscious thing that we love to do, stories. And sometimes we want the gentle story, it's the safe story, it's the story you tell children at night to relax them. And it's a gentle story of your journey. It's a gentle story of how clients can work with you and safely move to where they want to be. Or they can buy something that is going to improve their lives. And then you have the really direct stories, the ones that goad you into action. Anyone who starts a war starts like that. You get a beat going and you become really passionate and everybody then builds into the energy, builds into the story, and they're ready to go. This is a very common one if you go to some of the live events speakers put on because they want you to buy their programs or their books. And it is so easy to get caught up in that one. I found myself on a stage offering to pay thousands and thousands of pounds I don't have because I got caught up in the story and the rhythm and the beat. It wakes people up, it inspires and it motivates. And if you have a cause that you're passionate about, that is the style of story. And if you're really clever enough to move from the gentle into the inspiring, back to the gentle, a few pauses, pull people into your story, they will pull on it, love it, and they will get to like you and trust you because they can relate to you. And isn't that what it's all about? And your story can be used anywhere. Speak about it, present about it, use snippets of your story depending on your audience. You don't have to give an audience the whole story. Give them snippets that are relevant to what you're trying to get to them that day. And different audiences will require different bits of your story. Use it on your website. Do a video about your story. Incorporate it into your business message. And if you have a physical building, have your message on a big poster on the wall for people to look at. People with products, this works so well because they read it, they've engaged with it, and they're ready to engage with you and to buy. That's the power of a good story. Take some time to look around at some of the adverts that are out. The ones on the TV, online, even the written adverts that you see at bus stops or in your corner shop. See how people have pulled stories together to make it far more powerful and engaging. And then think about which part of the story you want to use that is part of you, your brand, your product, your business, maybe your client, maybe your customers. How are you going to gather those stories together so that you can use them really, really well? Go and make a timeline from the day you left school to now, looking at what did I really want to be, but what did I actually do and why? Because it's the why bit that matters. And that exercise will show you a running theme through your life that invariably fits with what you're doing today. Storytelling for business is the most powerful marketing tool you can use. And if you're not using it, learn how to use it today. And get out there and engage your customers and your clients at an emotional level and create trust and likability.